LinkedIn presents.
Tackling a career in the age of artificial intelligence starts with shifting your own mindset. I'm Morra Aarons-Mele, and this is The Anxious Achiever, the show that looks at the intersection of mental health and work and asks, how can we all do both better?
If you're interested in the story behind the business headlines, check out Big Technology Podcast, my weekly show that features in-depth interviews with CEOs, researchers, and reformers in business and technology. Hi, I'm Alex Kantrowitz. I'm a longtime journalist, CNBC contributor, and the host of the show. I empty my Rolodex every Wednesday to bring you awesome episodes, so go check out Big Technology Podcast. It's available on all podcast apps. We'd love to have you as a listener.
SAP Business AI is embedded across SAP solutions to drive immediate impact. Make confident decisions using your own data with top-tier security and privacy. Revolutionary technology, real-world results. That's SAP Business AI.
We're worried about AI. It feels out of our control. But what we've learned from years on this show, from therapy, from general wellness culture, from Maggie Jackson's great book, Uncertainty, is that the first thing to do when we feel out of control or things feel so uncertain is to change how we're thinking about it. Because that's what's in our control. We can reframe our attitude to uncertainty, to disruption, and it will help manage anxiety. Like any other anxiety, we have a toolkit to approach AI differently, to embrace the uncertainty and the challenge and the change that this shifting work landscape will put on us. Of course, it's easier said than done, but we have two guests today who will help us get a little bit closer. Later in the show, I'll speak with Scott Kaufman, a psychology professor at Columbia University, who'll help us think differently about approaching AI and change from a place of growth. But first, someone who is an expert on digital disruption and what it means for leadership. Charlene Li's latest book is called Winning with Generative AI, and she has a set of practical tools to share when it comes to not just accepting, but embracing this change at work. She'll share some ways we can practically be using AI, even as creatives, to make us better at our jobs and not replace us. Let's just start out. Why are people so pessimistic about AI and what it means, do you think?
I think people are pessimistic about AI because they fear it. They don't understand it. It is something that requires that they change their perspective on the world. And it brings up existential questions, such as, I'm a writer. If AI can do writing better than me, then who am I? What value am I creating? I am a coach, and if AI can be just as good or even a better coach than me, or even just replace some of the things, that calls into question, who am I? What is my value in the world? And AI, because it's working in the world of knowledge, it's commoditizing and democratizing knowledge. And I think where it's left with is we're going to have to add value and create impact in different ways. And I do believe, just to cut to the chase, it's going to require that we have more wisdom to be able to use that knowledge. And so somebody who's ambitious, who is thinking about how to have impact and achieve things in the world, it used to be pretty clear. You do this, you do that, you do well, and then you'll keep moving up. Now with AI, tasks are being automated, jobs are going to change or potentially go away, and career ladders are completely messed up. So yeah, there's a lot of reason why people are fearful, pessimistic about it very directly. And also a lot of doomsday people saying, like, this is the worst that could happen. AI is going to take over the world. I think AI right now has the intelligence of not much more than a computer, definitely not as intelligent as a cat, for example.
No.
And so it's going to take a while. And for it to have the capacity of a brain, of a human brain, to think in that way, the amount of power that it's going to take is going to be tremendous.
Literal power, you mean like energy, electric? Yeah.
Literally power. I mean, we use just a few watts. We use the energy that's in an apple to operate for the entire day. And for a machine to do that with the kind of processing that we have now, very expensive chips, huge amounts of power to be able to do this. So it is a significant issue. And so while the machines can do this, it can't do it at scale yet to the level where we would want it to do things. It can cause a lot of havoc. I think there's a lot of reasons to be cautious, to be pragmatic. But I think we're at this point, have used it as an excuse to not step up and lead and say, how can AI make a big difference in our world and make it better?
You've been looking at disruption for your whole career. You've been at the forefront of industries that have been hugely disruptive. Is there a lesson or growth in the very disruption that AI offers us?
I think disruption in general is something that is just very hard. And we like to have change in our lives, but not too much change
Yeah.
to the point where we're disrupted. And what I find so interesting is that some people are much more comfortable with disruption than others. I, for one, disrupt myself. I try to do something challenging, have an adventure, do something where I could fail every single day. And I've gotten used to it. And so, for example, I like to jump off of high places. I was recently in Hawaii and jumped off a 35-foot cliff. And for me, that's nothing, right? That's
Oh
nothing.
my God, Charlene.
And I had a teenager traveling with us, and she was terrified out of her mind. So we lowered the height down to 30 feet. There was a little ledge a bit lower. She was, oh, this is much better. It's still 30 feet up. And she still wouldn't jump. And then finally, somebody said, you're going to jump on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. And off she went. So we provided scaffolding. She could see that it was perfectly safe. She had to overcome this and jump. That was really hard for her to do. So if you aren't doing things like jumping off of high cliffs every day, if you're not causing disruption in your lives, it is really hard to do that for the first time. And we have gone through so many changes. And I point out to people, we went through a huge disruptive change with the pandemic. And so we did so many changes because we had to. And for many of us, we found ways to continue to thrive. And now we need to tap into those same muscles with AI, with all the changes that are happening in our lives. We can find ways to thrive with this if we set our minds to it. So I think of it as a disruption mindset, to run towards disruption, because you will change and grow. In particular, growth does not happen unless it's hard. The true, meaningful growth, organizationally, societally, interpersonal, personal, only happens when there is change, there is conflict, and the more change you want to create, the harder it's going to be, the more disruptive it's going to be.
I think there's also something about the AI. You kept talking about knowledge and is it going to make us obsolete? I'm a writer. I've honed my craft, my ego, my identity is wrapped up in this. And this machine is going to take all that away from me?
It's not going to take it away because in the end, you're a writer and you're a thinker and you're a storyteller and you're a curious investigator. And AI can do some of those things, but not the whole package. It also is really good at replicating what's already in its database, in its model and thinking. It can brainstorm and come up with new combinations of things, and it's great for that. But it cannot form wholly brand new areas of thinking and connection. It needs to be prompted. It needs a human behind it to think about it. And so as a writer, as a researcher, I use it to help me brainstorm. I give it my initial ideas and I say, how can I think about this differently? How can I structure this differently? What are some alternative ways of thinking that I have not looked at? And so it is a fantastic sounding board. It doesn't relieve me of the responsibility of thinking, of creating. And then once it's done, it can take my words, my past words, and do a decent job, not a great job, but a decent job of writing in my style. I can actually go into ChatGPT and say, describe to me Charlene Li's writing style, and it'll give a pretty good synopsis of it. And it's really annoying when it writes, it includes my grammatical errors. So it's really annoying. So I have instructions that do not make, correct the grammatical errors that are just obvious. So, and AI saves me from that. It is a fantastic editor. It is a fantastic ghostwriter. and it can write blurbs faster and more creatively than I can. And so it's helping me be a better creator overall by elevating my game. And it is required that I let go of this need to be able to do everything the same way I did. And so very quickly I realized all of my thinking is in ChatGPT. All of it, because it's public.
Literally.
Literally, all of it is in there. And so what am I going to do to continue to stay ahead of it? And it is for me to use AI to ensure that AI doesn't replace me. I'm going to use AI. I will be a better Charlene Li because of this AI. So I'm running towards this to figure out how I can use it to create the best content that's going to have impact.
We're in an authors group together, and you recommended that all of us basically create our own online versions of us in a bot so that AI couldn't steal it from us. Can you explain that to people who are sort of wondering how AI mines the essence of a human brain and can replicate it?
Yeah, so AI, generative AI in particular, is the newest form of artificial intelligence. We've had it for a long time, and it takes this powerful thing called machine learning and natural language processing. And instead of having to follow very, very strict rules of how to create something, it can be very creative. It's trained on all knowledge. So imagine it has read everything you've written, listened to everything that you've said in all the YouTube videos. We won't talk about copyright and everything here today, but just assume that it knows everything about you and everything that you've ever said or written. And it can do a pretty good job of regurgitating things. And so I take, for example, pre-written questions that I know from an interview or from podcasts, and I throw it in to ChatGPT, say, answer these questions as if you were Charlene Li. And I evaluate it against the actual answers that I gave in that interview or in a podcast and compare and contrast. And it's not as good as what I would come up with because my stuff is fresher and newer. I'm incorporating new things, but it's a pretty damn good rendition of me.
Wow.
It captures the main ideas. And it's better than putting those questions straight into GPT without the constraint of Charlene Li. Now, if that's doing a pretty darn good job, imagine a chatbot that I tune, that I train, that I have additional content that I can give to it. I can give it scenarios. I can tell it, don't answer these questions this way, do it that way. And I can also monitor and see what people are asking. And so I have one that I use for myself for my work. I've thought about putting it out there. I'm just not happy with the quality. And I'm also trying to figure out how much of this do I want to have out there. What I really wanted to do is to be a chatbot and answer bot, so that when you have a question, you can direct people to a very specific link to an article or a resource. And it's not there yet. So I don't want it to just answer questions. I wanted to direct you to a particular resource, either mine or somebody else's, that could be very helpful.
How do you train it? What does that look like?
This is the difficult part of it. Most of the bots that are out there are sort of bots in a box. And so you can put your content against it, and then you can choose whichever model that you want to use. I can use Claude, I can use ChatGPT, I can use Cohere, a bunch of different things. But then to train it, the only way you can train it right now is to give it more specific instructions. And you can only do that up to a certain point before you're not trying to answer. Instead of doing frequently asked questions, you're trying to do less frequently asked questions. And at some point, it doesn't work. And so if you have your own model on your own server, then you can start doing some fine-tuning training. You can do one-shot training. I just haven't gotten to that point because I'm not a technical person and the tools just aren't there yet. I figure when the tools get there, and I do believe they'll be there very, very soon, because companies want this. They want it to be easier. And do it for my customer service. Do it for people who are coming to my website asking questions before they buy. And now if you've ever used any of the chatbots, they're pretty useless. But if they can tap into the existing knowledge base, but then you need another bot that goes and checks and say, is that answer right? And so you have a bot that understands a question, a bot that taps into and sends it to the right database to get the information, comes back, and you have another bot that is checking to make sure the answer is actually right and gets rid of the hallucinations that could be there.
I just learned about hallucinations. Tell us what a hallucination is.
Well, it's actually being creative, because the way that the model works, it understands how language or images or code, music, video, anything has been put together. And it can interpolate from that, well, probabilistically, this is the next word that should follow, and the word after that, and the word after that, or the pixels that it puts together. So if it's stringing words together, it says, this sounds pretty good. And in most cases, it's pretty correct. But every once in a while, it just makes things up because it's not a search engine. It's not looking and retrieving a link. It is literally using its broad knowledge of the world, trying to answer your question. But if you're brainstorming, you're looking for things, hallucinations, as we call them with quotes, are a really good thing because you're asking it to put things together, look at things from a different perspective, and probabilistically say, what could be possible of things that we have not thought about? We use AI. We think it's all powerful and knowing. It knows a lot, but it is not perfect because of these hallucinations. So the most important skill for us to develop as we are using AI is critical thinking. It's to be able to look at the results and go, does that make sense from all my knowledge and experience? Does that make sense?
I have a very close relationship with Claude. And when I have Claude write in the voice of me, Claude is super cliche sometimes, trite, cliche. And I'm always telling Claude to stop being so saccharine, so cliche. And the more I talk to him, I do feel like it's listening. And the more disappointed I get when it throws back total crap.
Yeah. And if you think about what it's like working with humans, you work with somebody who's kind of new in their job. They're not doing it very well. You give them feedback. They take most of it. They take 80% of it and make the same 20% mistakes over and over again. And you kind of throw up your hands like, okay, this is the way this person works, right? So we're going to have to work around it. And that's how I think about all of these AI models. It is a new employee who doesn't know what's good and what's not. It's doing their best, and you need to train it. You need to give it feedback. And so I will literally give it feedback. This was really good. That was not good. Remember this.
And it remembers.
And it can, again, depending on where you put this, what it looks like, if you're using your own models or if you're using it inside. Again, if you're using a MyGPT or a project inside of Claude, it will remember that for that project.
Now, Charlene, you and I are both self-employed, right? And so our thoughts pay our bills. Do we have more freedom and less existential fear? I mean, I'll never forget, I read in the Wall Street Journal probably a year ago now, I think it was the CEO of IBM who said they're going to cut immediately at least 30,000 jobs because AI will make those obsolete soon. And I thought, oh my God, how does someone at a company like that show up at work every day? It's a little different for you and me. It's scary. Like, where does that hit?
I think it's really hard if you're a person in a company and you're doing a very specific job that's made of tasks that you can just see coming from a mile away, it's going to get automated. And you're looking to the right, you're looking to the left, and you just go, one of the two of us or one of the three of us are going to be here at 5 years' time or whatever X time. So what am I going to do? I can sit here and wait. I can sit here and look for another job. I can increase my skills. I keep saying it's not AI that's going to take your job. It's going to be somebody using AI who's going to take your job. So be the person who adopts and uses AI. Champion it. Understand how it's going to be used. Bring it into the organization and be ahead of that. Again, I've seen so many cycles of disruption. You are always going to be ahead. If you can just say slightly ahead of other companies, of other, I hate to say in a competitive way, of other people. Ideally, you bring everybody up to speed. And ideally, the company can do this in a way where it can manage the workforce and set expectations carefully to say, this is how we're going to use AI. We are going to upskill and reskill people into these new jobs. Certain jobs are going to go away, but they're not going away tomorrow. And so we're going to slow down our hiring to make sure we don't overhire in those positions. And so it's just having a rational approach to thinking about bringing on a very disruptive technology. All of the reports we're seeing is that the kind of work it can do, especially in the knowledge space, and in the lower levels, and also at the very, very highest levels, the people who are paid the most to go and manage people, to manage schedules, to optimize, to create project plans, that's probably where the jobs are going to get automated first. because AI can do a better job of that high-level management work. And also, to some degree, that very labor-intensive, highly routine tasks can also be automated.
Why is AI good at that sort of systems planning and analysis?
Because it holds so much more data and scenarios. So if you think about what management does, it's looking at a bunch of data and it's deciding, you're making decisions left and right constantly all day. If you can make better decisions with AI, you may not need as many people. You may not have to go through as many cycles as you to run all the different options. AI would just run it for you. So you may not need as many managers, as many leaders. I know one organization who hired an AI as a CEO because they basically, what does the CEO do? Is make sure that everyone knows what the strategy is. We've already set the strategy. We just need a CEO to make sure that everyone's executing on the strategy. And AI can do that better than a human can in some ways. So while they were looking for the real person CEO, they said, we're going to get an interim CEO to make sure everybody is doing what they're supposed to be doing, taking any anomalies and adjusting the plan so that everybody now knows what everyone else is doing. And the AI can actually do that better than a human can.
But someone has to read the AI and absorb it.
Yeah, it's just going straight into, again, the plan, the updated plan. It's updated, I think, once a week. And it goes into Slack. Everybody's communicated into it, and it goes down through the entire organization the same way that a CEO would give a weekly update. Here are the changes we're going to make to respond to market changes. So everybody's inputting stuff into the AI, and AI is coming out with some answers. It is crazy in some ways, right? They're not saying that the CEO can do everything. It's an interim CEO. But for the things that they really needed at that time, at that particular moment, they felt it's better than having nobody in that role until we can find our human CEO. And they're finding, oh, this AI CEO is doing a pretty darn good job. And it's helping them think about how are we going to change the job description of a CEO.
Yeah, what's left?
Well, the interesting thing is the motivation, communication part of it becomes much more important. The human connection, the alignment that has to happen. The execution part is not as important for the CEO. And a lot of CEOs are very execution oriented. They feel like they're in the thick of things, so things would fall apart if they weren't there. Well, this new way of an AI-driven, empowered organization, operations will continue. But if you want to make changes, if you want to inspire people, emphasize a particular area, inspire people, AI is not great at doing that right now. That's a very human aspect of things. And frankly, people, humans, are going to want to hear from a human.
And I think people who think that part of this CEO's job is a duty of care, is chief empathy officer, right, is to create a holding environment. I mean, leadership is about creating the right environment for people to thrive. So few leaders actually do it. That feels like a piece that an AI probably would not do so well.
You'd be amazed.
Although we know that it works in therapy. Yeah, tell me.
In Reddit, there's an Ask the Doc Reddit. And last year, they did an experiment. They took a bunch of questions from there with the doctor's responses, gave it to an AI, had the AI respond to the same questions, blinded the results, and then gave them to a panel who had no idea which things were AI, which things were human, and had them rate them on the quality of the response, accuracy of the response, and also how empathetic the response was. And in all cases, the AI got a better ranking on both than the human. And when they looked into the empathy part of it, what they realized is that the AI just wrote more. They said to the patient, I'm so sorry you're having this problem. It sounds like it's really hard for you, and this is really bothering you. Let's take a closer look at this. Whereas the human doctor I've got, 15 minutes to answer as many questions as I can because I'm doing this out of my goodness of my heart. And also we found that the AI was more accurate than the doctors were too as well. Because again, it's a body of knowledge. So the thing is, you can tell the AI what fairness looks like. What does it mean to be empathetic? And fairness is not a given. For example, are we trying to pursue equality or equity? Those are two very different ideas and definitions of fairness. How do you want to weight the way you make decisions based on those two beliefs, those two values? And we talk about bias. Everything has a bias. What are you biasing towards or biasing against? So knowing what you're biasing towards is a really helpful thing. And then when it comes to empathy, the machines don't get tired. We as humans run into empathy fatigue. And you and I have met many, many leaders who are not strong on emotional intelligence. So I hope that we as humans, to be better humans, will use AI. We can literally put on empathy goggles. We'll be able to see things, go look around our blind spots with this technology, to understand people, to do what I call subtle translations about body language or tone of voice, kind of kick us on the side of the head like, hey, you need to shut up now in this meeting. You're talking too much. It's one of those things where I would love to have a mansplaining app that would kick a guy, typically, who is going on and on without any recognition that they're just mansplaining and talking down to somebody who knows, if not just as much, more than what they're trying to explain. So I kind of joke about this, having a mansplaining app, but we can think about so many ways AI can save us from ourselves that I think are coming around the corner.
You're blowing my mind because, I think a lot of the ways that I think about anxiety is getting in the way of us trying to be the empathetic, patient, gentle leaders we want to be, is that when we're in an anxious state, it's really tough, right? You're impulsive, you're worried about getting to the next thing because your threat response is up. And it occurs to me that AI doesn't get anxious. It's not distracted. It can invest wholeheartedly or whole-mindedly in a way that humans can't always.
And I think it can also detect when our anxiety is going up. And so I would hope that there are ones that are connected to our rings, our rings, our watches, whatever, watching us through various cameras, again, with all of this permission. It can just say, again, my ring will tell me, you're stressed right now. Now would be a really good time for you to take a mindful moment. Like breathe, go and take a walk or something, because your heart rate variability is going down. So, or whatever it is, it's detecting stress levels and anxiety levels. And it would be a great help. And it's almost like a really good friend looking out for you to make sure you're operating and performing at the best level, that you bring your best self forward. Even in the middle of a call, for example, on Zoom, people are sending all their AI transcript things into Zoom now. And I sometimes use those as training. So I will literally pull down a transcript. I will pull down a recording. The AI is better at analyzing transcripts. And I go analyze this transcript. It didn't go as I expected for these reasons. Can you identify places in the conversation where I could have done things differently? It'll give me back feedback. It can look at all of my calls over time, or if I'm working with a salesperson or any kind of engagement, and say, look at all of these things. We know these are developmental issues. What are ways? Can you give very specific examples so that we can point them back to that person? Because again, giving coaching and managing somebody, being able to find very specific examples is very difficult. Well, so much of the stuff we do now is recorded. You actually have a fighting chance of going back and finding those examples. You can't sit with a coachee or somebody you're managing 24/7, but AI can.
Hey you, I'm Andrew Seaman. Do you want a new job? Or do you want to move forward in your career? Well, you should listen to my weekly show called Get Hired with Andrew Seaman. We talk about it all, and it's waiting for you, yes you, wherever you get your podcasts.
Tired of AI hype without results? SAP Business AI isn't just talk. It's embedded across SAP solutions, driving immediate impact for your organization. From Joule, your digital assistant, to AI-powered capabilities throughout the SAP portfolio, SAP Business AI helps you make confident decisions based on your own data, all while maintaining the highest security and privacy standards for growth-focused businesses. Revolutionary technology, real-world results. That's SAP Business AI.
I've talked to you in the past about how you manage your own boundaries and protect them, how you've helped other people, your teams. Does AI help you keep boundaries or work in a different way that feels more self-protective?
So 2 ways to think about this. I'm very transparent about when and how I use AI. In the book, we were having an entire appendix of when we use AI and how we use it, how do we safeguard and ensure that it's not going off and doing some rogue thing, that it's right and it's real? Because it's a book about generative AI, we should be very explicit about how we're using generative AI to write the book. And the other way to think about it is it helps me. And again, I don't think the tools are necessarily there yet, but I think it helps me scale. And it's going to be a productivity boon. And also as a solopreneur, it's going to be able to scale me. And so I'm working with a group called Raleigh that does a lot of corporate training. And so what they will do is we're going to go into the studio. I'll get a digital twin recorded of me with hand motions and everything. And they'll be able to use that digital twin to create any sort of content. So I'll be recording the original content. But if a company wants to add new content around specific values or alignment with their strategy, I don't need to go into the studio. I can write it up. I can even use AI to write it up, give it to my digital twin, and it'll just produce that video and all the training materials behind it too as well. It'll be customized to that company. And at scale, you can imagine this being customized to each person the way they want to learn. And even at greater scale, I now have a tool that can do this in any language with AI. So if somebody wants a speech or a talk or training in Mandarin Chinese, my Mandarin is terrible. There's no way I could ever give a speech. My co-author, Katja Welch, she is Bulgarian. So I made a sample for her of me speaking Bulgarian to her, talking about the power of AI. And she goes, "You sound very authentic. You sound like you're from Sofia, the capital Sofia. And you sound like a newscaster, like a news anchor." It's very good. It's very professional. And it's completely accurate.
If I am someone listening who is that entry-level lawyer, accountant, whose job is very task-oriented, I've paid a lot of money, I've gone to school, I have student loans, I'm anxious. What's your recommendation?
My recommendation is to upskill as quickly as possible. And that means, for example, when you come out of law school, when you come out of computer science engineering, for example, you're doing the base level of work. And over time, you learn that pretty quickly, and then you can do higher level work. So instead of writing code, you are checking code now. And you need to get to that checking code space as fast as possible. So you want to stay ahead of what AI can do. And the advantage here is that AI can teach you all of those things. It can actually do that routine work, so you can get to the more interesting work faster than you could in the past. This is why I believe career ladders will have to change. Instead of hiring people for entry-level jobs that did these routine things, you're going to hire people at the entry level who already know how to do the routine things with AI and can now focus on the higher level things. And the best way to do that is to do it now, to use these tools. Any paralegal can start using these tools. Any coder can start using GitHub Copilot to write better code, to check their code. And so the sooner you learn how to use these tools, the more cycles you're going to have to do the higher level things that, frankly, weren't accessible to you because you didn't have the time and the resources to be able to do them. So we're going to up-level people very, very quickly into the next rung of that ladder. And that's why the career ladders are going to start shifting, because the expectations of how long you would spend at the bottom level of the ladder is going to change. And even the definition of the bottom rung of the ladder is going to change. And this is the thing I would say. We can think about being anxious around change. And when we come across change, we want to go through it as quickly as possible. And that's the way we think about it in business. I think we should actually think about it differently. This messy middle that you move into, this place where you've left what you were behind and you haven't arrived at where you're going, this messy middle is a very rich and interesting place.
Ooh, that's hard.
I know it's super hard. And the way you can do that is to prepare yourself, to put in place scaffolding, to know that this is a journey that you're starting and you're doing it intentionally. The people who do disruption really well, it isn't because they have jumped off a lot of cliffs. They're doing new disruptions well because they know that whatever happens, they're going to be okay. That's the key belief, is that no matter what happens, good, bad, whatever the outcome is, you're going to be okay. It doesn't mean that you're going to be successful. It may mean that you fail. But even in that failure, you can look at it in the face and go, if that happens, I'll be okay. And that gives you so much tremendous confidence now. I think a lot of anxiety is around, what about the unknown? Well, what can we know? And what are the unknown things that we can get comfortable with, knowing that it's going to stay unknown until we take that first step and know that more things will become clearer, not completely clear, but because we're in a different spot, we'll look at things from a different perspective. And so I really invite people to move into this disruptive space. And instead of trying to run through it, expect that you're going to feel disrupted. It's going to feel you're going to feel a little anxious. And that's okay. Because to expect that you're not going to be anxious is like, are you kidding me? That's part of the thrill. Or again, I think the difference between anxiety and excitement is confidence. If you can move into this space, you'll look at that same energy in a very different way. When I go on stage and give a talk, I am excited because I know what's the worst thing that could happen. The worst thing that ever happened to me is I fell off a stage in the middle of a speech, fell off the back of it because I literally fell off a stage. It's like one of the worst things you could do. I just like disappeared. And they were like, what happened?
Okay?
Everyone like, yeah. And I'm like,
Oh my God.
I'm fine. I got up and I'm fine. A little embarrassed, a little dusty from being behind the stage, but I was fine. So I always walk a stage now before I get on it, so I know where the limits are.
You're not going to fall off.
I'm not going to fall off a stage again. But what's the worst that can happen?
But the people that I work with, one of the things that we're working with is that inner core that says things aren't going to be okay.
And so what are the steps? What are the things you need to know to be true so that you feel okay? This is an approach to minimally viable product, minimally viable okayness. So you can think about it as, what are the things I need to have? That we talk about it as psychological safety. As a leader, how do I create this container? We talk about the messy middle, the liminal space. And when you talk to psychologists about the liminal space, when we're entering, and all of us enter into the liminal spaces at points in our lives, the way to succeed in that is to have a vision of what you want to achieve. You're not quite sure how to get there, but you're beginning the journey, moving into the liminal space, knowing, I want to move through this to get to where I want to be. And then along the way, there are places and people that you can turn to that remind you of what that journey is going to look like. You think of Luke Skywalker in his darkest moments. Obi-Wan Kenobi would appear to him as a vision. And we as leaders need to be that light at the end of the tunnel, reminding people, I know this is hard. This is where you are supposed to be right now. It is a struggle, and you're going to be okay. Rather than, oh my gosh, I'm going into this dark, scary place. I'm going to get ambushed, and I'm going to die.
We're all going to lose our jobs.
We're all going to lose our jobs. And the reality is, jobs just don't disappear overnight. They have an arc. There is an ebb and flow to business. People do hiring and then they fire people. People ramp up and then they ramp up too fast and they have to get rid of whole divisions. There are things that you are in a business of and you realize the customers are evolving. We don't want to be in that business anymore, so we're going to shut that down. But even when they do that, it may feel like they're doing it overnight, but they typically, if they're good leaders, will say, we decided to do this. We're going to be methodical about this, systematic about this. We're going to take the next 6, 12, 18 months to go through this change. It's going to be hard, but we're going to make this change. And if you're not on board with this change, then this is not the place for you. There was one CEO who said, we're going to be an AI first, AI ready company. And he said, where everyone's going to get tools, everyone's going to get training, and you get a light next to your name. You get a green light if you are actively using these tools to get your job done. Fantastic. You get a yellow light if you're trying. You haven't quite figured it out yet, but you're giving it a go. That's great. You get a red light if you haven't done anything at all. Then he drew a line in the sand. In 6 months, there will be no more red lights at this company. And you will either be a green and yellow light, or you will not be here. And we'll have a conversation. If you are not willing to move into becoming at least a yellow light within the next 6 months, this is not the place for you. And I believe this is what companies need to do. AI is going to be a reality of our future. And the sooner we wake up to that fact, And the sooner we support that change, it's going to be disruptive. It's going to be hard, but the sooner we can wrap our heads around the fact that AI is coming to, no matter which way we look at it, and we can choose to adopt it and own what that speed is going to be like, or our competitors are going to do it. Our employees are going to start using it on the side without approvals to get their job done. And that is already happening. The vast majority of companies do not have AI use policies. And you're just opening yourself up for liability and risk. And you're better off having a strategy, having governance, having policies, having an approach so that you can do this in a thoughtful, strategic way versus happenstance and by serendipity.
We all have to prepare to get uncomfortable.
So true. And I think that being comfortable being uncomfortable is the key here.
Next, we'll hear from Scott Barry Kaufman, a professor of psychology at Columbia University and director of the Center for Human Potential. Scott is also founder of Self-Actualization Coaching. He flips how we think about a lot of things on their head, and in our conversation, we focused on growth and all the good things that can come from AI at work. There's a quote you have on one of your blog posts that I thought I would read to you. It's sort of maybe a little on the more neurotic side, but the essence of the human condition that I think a lot of us, it's from Ernest Becker. The irony of the human condition is that the deepest need is to be free of the anxiety of death and annihilation, but it is life itself which awakens it. And so then we must shrink from being fully alive.
I definitely take an existential humanistic view on everything. The philosophy is very much driven in the motivation to live life as fully as possible and to not shrink away from it and not to hide and not to avoid.
And is that something that we have the power within ourselves to change?
Oh, absolutely. You have to want to change. Of course, you have to. Anyone can have the power for anything, but if they don't do anything about it, they are not going to make any progress. You can blame all the systems and inequalities you want, but if you don't actually get off your butt and try to make change in your own personal life, nothing's going to happen. And so I think it's just super important to want to change. And I think that's hard for a lot of people with avoidant tendencies, life avoidant tendencies, I'll call them. Whenever that happens, for a lot of those individuals, they'll come up with a million different justifications and reasons for why they can't engage in something. Oh, the system's rigged, or I wasn't born with a talent for it, or it's going to be a lot of hard work. Well, yeah, anything worth doing is going to be a lot of hard work.
I think there's a lot of us out there who are on the neurotic side, who are worriers, who are anxiety driven, who we really have to choose life. Does that resonate?
Oh, it resonates very, very deeply. Just had an individual on my podcast talking about the upside of OCD. He really believes that a lot of people who have diagnosed OCD really have a lot of existential sensitivity, and he calls it existential sensitivity, which is really sensitivity to loss and can be a superpower. It's certainly, when channeled into creativity and channeled into arts and artistic endeavors, can be a real, real, real upside. Obviously, it doesn't feel like an upside when you're in the thralls of an episode, but his name is Michael Alcee, Michael Alcee. He's all about humanizing OCD from an existential humanistic perspective. Me and him share that perspective on disabilities and things of that nature. And there is that real, real deep sensitivity to loss. Death is the ultimate loss in a lot of our eyes, but it's all part of the same system. Your fear that, checking behavior. If you're in the airport, a lot of people will see, like, did I leave this? I have to go back and check again. I have to check again. I have to check again. Well, what is underlying that? If you just take a step back and just really try to meditate and calm down for a second, like, what am I really afraid of? I'm afraid of permanently losing something. And if we can overcome that fear, that really unlocks a lot in our lives.
Do you see that translate at work? I think a lot of us, especially these days where layoffs seem to be looming, it's very easy to operate from a fear of loss. when you show up at work?
I'd actually like to hear more of what you were thinking. Like, what's in your head right now? Like, what are some examples of a fear of loss at work?
Oh, God. A fear of losing your job, a fear of not getting recognized or promoted, a fear of losing respect, a fear of losing your livelihood, and then the cascade of fears that might come along, right? I lose my job. I can't get another job. I can't afford to send my kid to college, right? The catastrophizing cascade. A lot, I think, of people say, I fear AI is going to come and make me irrelevant. We have a fear of irrelevancy. We have a fear of being obliterated by technology. These fears are very real for people.
Well, one thing with people with high anxiety or OCD are good at is their imagination, which can be a superpower, but coming up with as many a million what if catastrophe scenarios is actually a form of divergent thinking and creativity in a way. I mean, this is all part of CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. I'm a big fan of mindful cognitive behavioral therapy. My friend Seth Gillihan has written beautifully about that and the importance of presence and acceptance in life. And, how do you want to show up for yourself? How do you want to show up for others? And what are you willing to accept about life? In any situation, there always is an inherent danger. But it's also interesting. The thing about death is interesting because it's like it happens to all of us, whether it's tomorrow or 50 years from now, it's coming. And you could worry about that, but that really does detract from the moment, and it really does detract from the appreciation of the moment, the appreciation of the gratitude and gratefulness you have for existence itself. That's a real shame when people's worries really distract them so much from their present moment of gratefulness.
Yeah. Does it detract us from our self-actualization?
Yes, we can just simply think of self-actualization as becoming all you're capable of becoming creatively. Your creative actualization, what makes you unique. You have a lot of different needs as humans, the need for safety, the need for respect, the need for self-esteem and connection, relationships. It doesn't make you very unique to scream, but I won't respect. It's like, okay, stand in a line. Everyone in this line wants respect. But self-actualization to me is really, what is that? The most beautiful growth potential of your being. I've never put it that way. I want to write that down.
That's very beautiful. You talk a lot about human potential in the workforce. One of the things that makes me nervous about AI and all it means, but more in general, what I see happening in workforces where extreme cost cutting and extreme focus on productivity is the name of the game.
Yeah.
It is harder to self-actualize or to be the creative person that every team needs. That's what makes me nervous, right? How do we choose growth and the path to creativity when the focus is relentless on productivity, doing more with less, and now bringing in machines?
I always like to go to the most deepest existential philosophical core of a question. But how do you live in a world where people all around you and all the social pressures are to be, quote, optimized, to be, there's a broader question you're asking. It's not just in the workplace. It's like you go on Instagram and like all the bros are telling you every day, like, oh, you need to be optimized. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Okay, get up at 6 a.m, jump in that cold bath, and then you can be an optimized human. Well, look, I think that actually is completely in the wrong direction. It strips our humanity away from us. Computers are going to be very good at learning the algorithms or the protocols on how to be an optimized human, and they'll become optimized humans. But this is part of the plight of the transcender. I teach a course for Columbia University students, but also for the general public. I've adapted the course I taught for adults who want to transcend. And we're actually in week 7 right now, wrapping up another cohort of my transcend course. And we had a really beautiful discussion, me and the students, they're all adults, and about how hard it is being a transcender in a non-transcending world. And I think you have to fight against that. And I think there are some things you just have to put your values down in the sand and, come what may, it is a fact of life that you may be in an environment surrounded by those who are not really aligned with you, but there's nothing you can do about that.
In an interview with you I listened to, and I'm going to blank on the name of the academic, but you talked about determinants of creativity and creative thinking. And in young kids, one of the determinants was that the kid was okay being an N of one. They were okay if they had the best idea to build a fort and none of their friends thought it was a good idea or liked it, but the kid was like, no, this is going to be a great fort and I'm going to do it anyway.
I'm such a big fan of that research, and it's not that known. The Paul Tarrant's creativity studies, where he tracked elementary school students throughout the course of their lives to see who ended up being the most creative people as adults, starting with the looking in elementary school age, which is a fascinating study. And one of the big predictors was the extent to which these kids were okay being a minority of one in terms of your ideas. Being a minority of one is a really lonely place. You see something that you see an injustice, or you see everywhere you look around you is like optimization. And let's say you're the only one who's like, no, I think humanity, and they're like, bro, you ain't hitting the gym enough, if that's your idea. And still hearing that, receiving that, and say, no, I still think it's humanity. To be able to still say, no, I still think this is what it is, can be really, really hard, especially when younger, in environments where there's a lot of peer pressure to conform. But it is ultimately the most rewarding thing you can do. And it also ends up being the thing that has the biggest payoff in life, not just spiritually, intellectually, but also sometimes money. If you can create the idea that no one else has created, like tech, you create a tech, or you write a book. There are books these days that are a dime a dozen. Write the thing that is like really in your deep soul that challenges some prominent narratives. That's really interesting to me.
Let's shift to the workforce. How does one actively, practically start to choose growth in an organization maybe where it is all about optimization? The people that I speak with every day who work in companies don't know when their division might be ended, or they might be let go, or their team might be let go. It is very hard humanistically, when we feel like we're under threat, to choose growth.
Thank you for acknowledging that, first of all. I think that's a great first step. Choosing growth is an interesting juxtaposition against choosing fear. Like Abraham Maslow has this great quote: we can choose to go forward in growth or choose to move back in fear, and we have to just keep choosing the growth option again and again and overcoming the fear response again and again. That's roughly the quote. And you enumerated a whole bunch of fears earlier, that people at work have. What really is the worst case scenario if those fears come true in the whole existential scheme of self-actualization? If those fears do come true, it wouldn't feel good. But what is ultimately best for your self-actualization? What is ultimately best for your growth? And if some of those fears came true that you mentioned earlier, I would argue that actually, that would probably be better for your self-actualization. Like, you don't want to be chosen for something that isn't right for you. You don't want that. Like, you can go your whole life being like, oh, well, this attractive girl, what if she rejects me? What if I ask her on a date and she rejects me? Well, if she rejects you, she's done you a favor. That wasn't the right fit. Get over it and move on. See, I really am a strong believer the things that are a great fit, things that are really meant for you, the things that are really good for your growth are organic, they're natural, they're easy. There's a real feeling of familiarity and a feeling of coming home. Choosing growth to me is a constant process of coming home to yourself, to your inner core, and to your most creative, alive, unique center of being, which is how I define self-actualization. And if you're in an environment, let's say you're at work, and day after day, you don't know where that center is anymore.
That is an incredible way to put it. Say
Yeah.
that again.
Well, I really do believe we all have this, the most alive, unique center of our being that wants to be actualized. And that's what life is about, is actualizing it. And if you're at work and you feel day after day after day, you've completely lost touch of that center of being, you don't even know what it is anymore. That's a signpost. It's not a signpost to conform more. That's the thing. Sometimes it's actually more beneficial to say, well, this is a signpost of something really, really important. And life is short. And I was once in touch with the center of being. I'm no longer in touch with the center of being. The real problem there is that you've lost touch with the center of being. The real problem is not everyone else around you, you know? I mean, that contributes to the problem for sure.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of solutions that don't immediately involve quitting. I am a big fan of the job crafting literature.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen and even consulted for organizations using job crafting where people really have lost touch of who they are because of their current role as it's defined. And then if the manager is open to them redefining their description, but keeping the same exact bottom line,
Mm-hmm.
it's, like it can cause a huge shift. Teachers, there are examples of teachers who feel that they're in a system that's so stagnant and standardized test focused, and they've lost their whole sense of why they wanted to become a teacher in the first place. But, maybe someone has a background in singing and has changed their, job description to be like the singing teacher, or like just allowing them to, bring more of your unique creative being into your work is possible. You don't always have to just quit. That's not what I'm saying.
How can you apply the sort of methodology of reconnecting with your center if you think that your job is one of those jobs that in a few years will be made redundant by AI?
Do we have any evidence that that's true? Do we have any evidence that it just in a couple years, maybe for certain fields, but can you give me any specific examples? Because I've yet to see a specific example where it would just make the human redundant.
I know, it's interesting. So this is what I've been talking to a lot of people about, and there are a million use cases, but as of now, no company has sort of flicked the switch and said, we're going to roll this out. That's not there yet. However, there is, the WHO has projections that says they believe that within, I think it's 5 or 10 years, 40% of current roles will be obliterated because of AI advancements. And you can see it. You can sort of see it encroaching in a lot of rote tasks. You often hear the examples of lawyers, right, at low levels whose job it is to comb through tons and tons of case law and precedent. So I don't ask this because I think it's going to happen tomorrow. I ask it because it's such a frequent topic of conversation that it's hard not to absorb it.
This will make my work all the more important because self-actualization can't be replicated. People try, and it comes across as fake and phony. And turn that fear into something energized. Fear by itself is not productive, but fear can be productive when it's like, okay, well, yes, and yes, I fear that a robot's going to come take my job. And what do I have that robot doesn't have? And there is a humanity in things that AI may never be able to replicate. This is coming from someone who majored in artificial intelligence.
Did you really?
One of my majors at Carnegie Mellon University. Yeah. Human computer interaction in the School of Computer Science. I don't have all the answers, but I think that a big key of it is really getting in touch with that unique, alive, unique center of your being. And, what kind of accountant are you? What kind of lawyer are you? Like if, it might be a good opportunity. Turn something that seems like dire into an opportunity to create the most unique lawyer business service offering that you possibly can. It'll only be better for the world.
I hear you on that, but I moderate, or I am an expert contributor on a message board, a community for people at work, big platform, Glassdoor. And the stories that people tell Now, I know that if you're one of the people who tell a story, it means that you're in a minority who is very activated. But, it's part of my job, actually, all across the internet and with real people too, to hear the stories of how people feel they are treated at work. One of the storylines that I hear, and that is really borne out, there was an article about it in the Wall Street Journal, is the notion that companies are making broad cuts of senior talent. And it's really hard for me to hear an argument that we should all self-actualize and, go after divergent thinking. I believe this all. And yet I see in a lot of organizations values that are the exact opposite.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I see it too.
So what do we do with that?
I mean, I'm just really such a turn lemons into lemonade kind of person, Like, I mean, really, if you were pushed out of an organization for that reason, I mean, I really would consider that a blessing, like that you're no longer with that organization. And yeah, I know that all the caveats apply, like you have children to feed, like you have, but Scott, but Scott, but Scott. I hear the million but Scotts in my head, and you can but Scott all day long, but Scott's not going to get you a new job.
Mm-hmm.
These days, the thing that's most on my mind is really helping people overcome a victim mentality. That's what my next book's about. And I think it's really important to not have a victim mindset over losses and to have post-traumatic growth, which is what I talk about a lot, and really view it as such a blessing in disguise to not be a part of something that's not aligned with your values. I think being really, really vigorous and really hold firm to that, and it might hurt. And there might be periods where you feel like you've been rejected or you feel like a loser. We all go through those periods, but I think being able to create something or to come up with something that is so strongly in line with your values is something that you can't get fired from, all this is cold comfort, and I think that so listening to people's stories is very important as well. And I have a lot to learn myself about the real dangers. Right now, I'm seeing a lot more fears than I am seeing the actualities. But it sounds like you're seeing some actualities, and I'm sure they exist, and I don't want to downplay them, but at this point, I'm seeing a lot more fears than things that are actually coming to pass.
Let's talk about post-traumatic growth. Can you define it and sort of lay out maybe a framework to think about it and some resources?
A lot of people have heard of post-traumatic stress disorder, which is actually very rare. Most people don't go through a challenge or go through an adverse experience and then immediately get post-traumatic stress disorder. Most people actually show resiliency, where they bounce back eventually to their old state. And then a minority, just like on the left tail, there's post-traumatic stress disorder. On the right tail, there's post-traumatic growth. So there's a minority of those, about an equal number, who also show growth from the experience. So not only did they bounce back and were they resilient, there's a lot in what I'm saying, because I'm also saying most people are resilient. And I think that's also a message that you don't hear these days. And I really want to spread that word. Most people actually are resilient. We humans can handle a lot more than we think we can. The what if? Yeah, so what if? Yeah, you're actually going to be able to handle it. On the upper end, a lot of people who maybe see stronger relationships or bonds with people over what happened, or maybe they see creative capacities within themselves, creative opportunities they never saw before. We kind of just talked about that a second ago. Maybe they see greater spiritual growth. That's a big one. You see it from very challenging experiences. A lot of people get more in touch maybe with the divine or whatever that looks like for a person. And yeah, there's various ways in which psychologists have found that people can grow from an adverse experience.
And are there things that you can put into practice?
Oh, yes. Yes. It's a lot of journaling, processing of your emotions in constructive ways, not, overcoming repetitive ruminations and making them constructive ruminations. Slowly over time, from an adverse experience, we can change our stories and change our narrative from being the victim of life to something I think more empowering, which is you're in charge of your life and you can make decisions and choices that lead you in the direction of growth, regardless of where you've come from. That's the message I like to spread.
Why don't you leave us with your sailboat metaphor?
Well, I tried to reimagine Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which looks like a pyramid. However, a lot of people aren't aware that Maslow never drew a pyramid. Oh, and so reading Maslow's writings, it occurred to me that, wow, he not only didn't draw a pyramid, but he really emphasized the difference between security needs and growth needs. That's really what he emphasized. And a sailboat, I think, is a better metaphor for that, because you have the boat itself. There can be a lot of assaults to our sense of stability, to our sense of, is water coming in? Do we have to spend all of our time and attention trying to make sure that we don't drown? And that really can take attention away from our self-actualization, right? But eventually we have to open up that sail if we're going to grow. Even if we're completely secure, we still have to open that sail and be vulnerable to the winds and rain and other boats crashing into us. You really start to think, how can we rise the tide for everyone in the sea? It kind of changes your whole way of thinking. Like when you're stuck in the survival mode, trying to get the water out of the boat, you're not thinking about the other boats in the ocean, right? But if you can move in the value and really engage with life and move, what port are you sailing to? And really you're moving actually now towards a port that's most valued to you. And that's your focus in life. It changes everything. You're able to withstand the winds more. You're able to be more resilient, and you'll have a fuller life. So I really want to encourage people to not be scared of opening or being anxious of opening up the sail. And, there's that great quote, Nietzsche quote, I believe, anyone who has a why can withstand, anything. It's important to recognize that.
My honest personal big takeaway here is the power of outside narratives and in keeping us stuck in fear and scared to open up our sail. So maybe reading less tech press and actually focusing on your why is, the kid with the fort. Like I have this image of a child who just is so passionate they don't care.
It's right. We can call it. You call it tech press. I call it tech hysteria. You can listen to the news and be scared. You can constantly be scared of anything, but on the other side of the fear is growth, and just never forgetting that, I think, is a really important part of living fully.
That's it for this episode of The Anxious Achiever. The show is produced and edited by Mary Dew, with production support and sound engineering by Nick Krinko. If you like what you heard, head to your favorite podcast app. Leave us a review. It really matters, and we appreciate the time and effort it takes. And if you don't subscribe or follow the show already, now's the time. And let us know what you'd like to hear more of. I get some of my best ideas from my listeners, so find me on LinkedIn, send me a message. You can find my weekly newsletter there as well. A big thanks to LinkedIn and all the listeners out there and our guests in the Anxious Achiever world. Until next time.